If your wood cutting board needs a little love, maybe it's looking kind of dull or has a funky, stinky odor you just can't remove, or you're just wondering the best way to get it clean, in this video, I'm gonna share some of my favorite tips and tricks along with the best way to keep it lasting as long as possible. Now for everyday cleaning, I like to keep it as simple as possible. And usually the first step after every time I use it, I just grab a bench scraper like this one here, or even just the back of a knife or a fork. We just wanna scrape off any excess food that's on the surface before we clean it. Then I come over to the sink and just give it a quick rinse with some water. Now, again, like I said, this is super simple, by no means groundbreaking, but then just grab a little bit of dish soap here. Now, something to always keep in mind with dish soap is a little goes a long way because it's highly concentrated. So you just need a few drops on the surface of the cutting board, then come through with a non-scratch scrub sponge and scrub down the entire area. Now, anytime you're cleaning a wood cutting board, it's always very important to keep in mind that you need to wet the entire thing, even the underside, even if you haven't used that side, because if you don't fully wet it, what can happen as it dries is it can crack and warp, and we don't want that. Now, once everything's nice and scrubbed and you feel like it's nice and clean, then come through with just some warm water again and rinse everything really well. We don't want to leave any soap behind. Now, it's always a good idea, and I highly recommend that you clean your wood cutting board after every single use. But something to really keep in mind is that it's best to clean it sooner rather than later. Really, anytime you let anything sit on here for an extended period of time, you run the risk of that soaking in and creating issues. In fact, this one here, that very thing happened, and as you can see, it has a little bit of staining and things. Definitely stick around, I'm gonna show you how to get rid of this. But again, if you can prevent it in the first place, that's the better way to go. Now, something that will destroy your wood cutting board over time is not properly drying it. Now, you might have noticed before, right away after rinsing, I just grabbed a handy dandy towel and just wipe down the entire board. This just gets that first layer of moisture off of the surface. Now, once everything's nice and wiped down, I like to grab it and bring it over here and just lean it against the wall. Now, the reason this is so important is it allows air to travel around the board so the moisture can evenly evaporate. Let's just say you lay it flat on your countertop, especially if it doesn't have feet, moisture is gonna get trapped, and that can create things like warping, cracking, and splitting, and we don't want that. And in most cases, I just let it sit like this overnight, and by morning, it's completely dry. There are two ways you should never ever wash your wood cutting boards that I feel like I need to mention. The first one, you probably guessed it, but it's your dishwasher. Just please don't do this. And the second is submerging the wood cutting board in water and letting it soak. Because again, excess moisture and wood do not mix, and really using either of those two methods is a fast-tracked way to damaging your board. But what if your board looks like this and needs a little bit more of a deep clean? Well, before I show you these three methods, I always like to mention first, clean the board with just a little bit of dish soap and water, like I showed you for everyday cleaning. I feel like that just kind of gets that first layer of grime off of there. Now, once you're done with that, there are a few options you can try. The first just being white vinegar. This does a great job. Now, I don't like to dilute my vinegar just because usually if I have an odor on there, or maybe you're cutting like raw meat on your cutting board, you want as much of the power of the vinegar as possible. Just add it in a little spray bottle here, give it a quick spray down, again, evenly across the board, and let that set for about 15 minutes. Now, the other thing you can try if you absolutely hate cleaning with vinegar is just some hydrogen peroxide here. This does a great job as well. Just again, spray it down and let it sit to try to just kill and get rid of any sort of bacteria that might be on the board. Now, my personal favorite, and the one I'm gonna show you exactly how to do on this board here, because this one has a stinky odor, and that is just a lemon and some coarse salt. What's great about this is you just spread the salt across the board, then cut your lemon in half and start scrubbing and kind of squeeze the lemon juice onto the board. This is not only going to clean the board here, and it's a natural option, but it's also gonna help pull out and suck out anything remaining in the board that could be causing those stinky odors and make it smell lemony fresh. When I'm using this mix, I do like to let it sit on the surface for a minimum of 5 to 15 minutes. That way the lemon and salt can have time to work and just suck out all those funky odors from the board. Once that's done, I'll come through, give it a quick scrape and rinse, and get it dry as quickly as possible. Now, I know some don't love to use a wood cutting board because they fear that it's porous and going to suck and hold on to bacteria. And I'll be real, I used to feel that way as well too, but there's actually an article I found not too long ago, I'll link it down below, that deep dives into this with some universities and found that yes, it will suck and hold on to some bacteria, but it actually traps the bacteria so it can't grow and kills it, and sometimes really quickly upon contact. I think it was like 3 to 10 minutes. Definitely check that out. I found it very interesting, and I feel like wood just kind of sometimes gets a bad rap, but many times it's a better option than plastics and other types of cutting boards as well. So it's been 24 hours, and as you can see here, the boards are nice and dry, and they're ready for our next step. Now, this is a really important one, so definitely don't skip it, and that is to oil them with a food-grade mineral oil. Now, after cleaning, you might notice a little discoloration on your board like this one here. It definitely looks better than where we started, but I'm not so worried about that because once we oil it, everything's gonna even out. Now, the one I like to use is Booze Block Mystery Oil. I just think it does a good job, but if you're looking for a cheaper option, or maybe you have this at home, you can just use walnut oil as well. What you wanna do is just apply a little bit to the board and then work it in a circular motion. Now, just like getting it wet, you wanna make sure to evenly oil the entire board, so that includes the sides and even the bottom. Just like your skin, over time it will get dry. The wood is the same way, and it needs that hydration. And the oil is really giving that to it. It's gonna help prevent things like cracking and splitting, but it's also gonna make the wood cutting board look so much better. It's gonna get rid of that dullness. It's gonna really bring out the beauty in the wood. I do suggest doing this about once a month, but it really depends on how much you use your wood cutting board in your home. If you start to notice it get kind of dry and dull looking, it's probably time to oil it. Now, a word of caution when you're oiling these boards, if you don't have something like mineral oil in your home, you might be tempted to go grab something like olive oil or really any vegetable oil, but please do not use this, because yes, it will look okay for a little while, but this will go rancid and start to stink, and then you pretty much just ruined your board. Now, once you're done oiling the board, it's important to let it dry for about 24 hours, and you wanna use that same method that we used after washing it. I do just like to put a few pieces of paper towel down here, just because I don't want the oil to transfer onto my countertop, but then just make sure to lean it against the wall here at an angle, and it should be set by morning. Now, a quick pro tip after the board is dry from oiling is you can come through with something like beeswax or board cream like this one here. Now, I will say, you wait 24 hours for the mineral oil to dry, then you apply this just the same way as we did with the mineral oil. Just apply a little bit to a towel and rub it in a circular motion, but then you have to wait another 24 hours for that to dry. So this whole thing is a bit of a process for, well, a piece of wood, but there's a huge benefit with this because not only do you help lock in that moisture so your board stays looking beautiful just like this, but you also help create a layer on the board so it helps fight against bacteria and keeps your board cleaner. And there you have it. Now you know the best way to clean and maintain your wood cutting boards. Thanks so much for watching, and if you're new here, consider subscribing and smash that like button. I also need to give a huge shout out to the Clean Squad members over on our Patreon. Thank you so much for your continued support of Clean That Up, and if you want to join us over there, definitely click the link down in the description below, and as always, I'll see ya on the next clean.